Today we are going to be continuing our journey from last week, right? This is a two-part series here, and we have been reflecting on our Unitarian Universalist values with love at the center. And as I shared last week, love is not this stagnant thing, right? Love is actually a breathing, living being that is dynamic. And it's dynamic in our faith. And as Unitarian Universalists, we belong to a living tradition, and our beliefs are extremely diverse and inclusive. And to be a people of a living tradition, that means we open ourselves up to change, to new experiences, and to have deeper understandings of life. And we move and grow as the world moves and grows. And we have the ability to adapt. Right? We evolve, and we do this collectively. We do this together. And as I shared last week, and I'll share again this week, at General Assembly in June of 2024, we witnessed a transformative moment as Article 2 was passed, replacing our 7 and 8 principles. And now we have these 6 values, all centered around love. And last week, does anybody remember what we talked about last week? Which ones we covered? Jet pig is a hint. So we did justice, equity, and transformation, right. So this thing called love is the power that holds us together at the center. And we are called to be accountable to one another for doing the work of our living tradition. And these 6 values that are centered around love, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity can act as guides to connect us to ourselves, to connect us to our community, and to connect us to the world around us. And as I said last week, we gather to reflect on the values of justice, equity, and transformation, the first part of Jet Pig. And this week, we are still centering the presence of love, and we are centering it through pluralism, interdependence, and generosity this week. And in order for us to truly connect and understand the meaning of pluralism, we must first open our hearts to the spirit of diversity. Now, before I continue, I'm just curious, how many of you have heard this word pluralism before? Yeah, right. How many of us know what it really means? Right? Yeah. Kind of, a little bit, yes. Some of us, yes. Great. So I think before we really get into understanding and talking about pluralism, we're just going to take a step back and talk about diversity and how these two concepts of diversity and pluralism are woven together. So diversity, in its essence, is this magnificent variety of creation, right? It's a tapestry of people and beliefs, religions, political values, foods, cultures, languages, ethnicities, nations, and on and on and on, right? It's also found in our living ecosystems. So diverse trees, right? Plants, animals, insects, and bodies of water. And all of these things, all of this diversity is reflecting the infinite imagination of creation, right? So we're just going to go a little bit deeper. And why pluralism and diversity are connected, and why we hold pluralism as one of our values. And we hold pluralism as one of our values because we as Unitarian Universalists affirm that every soul is sacred. Each and every one of us are unique and are an expression of divine love. We are diverse in culture, we are diverse in experience, we are diverse in our theology or no theology. We covenant in the spirit of spiritual community to learn from one another, right? We covenant to learn from one another, and in that we are able to be free. And because we were able to be free, we have a responsibility to search for truth and meaning in that freedom. We embrace our differences and our commonalities with love and curiosity and respect. That's a gift, right? I consider it to be a gift. And to covenant to learn from one another in search of truth and meaning, that takes time, right? It takes us to be vulnerable with one another. And how do we fulfill this sacred calling, right? To live into love and to hold pluralism as one of our values. How do we do that? Has anybody heard of the Pluralism Project at Harvard University? Oh, if you have an opportunity, I would really like to invite you to go online just to kind of take a look at the work that they've been doing. It's amazing. It's called the Pluralism Project, Harvard University. And according to the Pluralism Project, pluralism is not diversity alone, okay? Pluralism is an energetic engagement with diversity, right? That's the key. These are the key words: energetic engagement. The Pluralism Project of Harvard explains that pluralism is not about tolerance, right? We've heard those words before, right? Pluralism is not about tolerance, but it is about actively seeking out to understand across the lines of differences. We often hear that tolerance is this necessary virtue in our society, and indeed, tolerance does have its place, but it's not the thing, right? It's not the thing. And tolerance alone keeps us at a distance, right? It distances us from having the opportunity to get to know one another better. It allows us to share, pluralism allows us to share space. It permits, for example, Christians and Muslims and Jews and secularists to be on the same street, right? And have an opportunity to get to know one another, okay? Our Unitarian Universalist values invite us beyond tolerance. It invites us into a genuine relationship. It invites us into understanding. It invites us in to do the sacred. It invites us in to do the messy, hard work that it takes to love at the center and to hold these values to be true. And there was this paper that I read at the Pluralist Project It was a paper on the historical movements of theology. And it said that tolerance is too thin of a foundation for a world of religious differences, diversity, and proximity. Tolerance, it does nothing to remove our ignorance of one another, and it leaves in place stereotypes. It leaves in place half-truths. It leaves in place fears that underline old patterns of division and violence. See, pluralism is the active engagement with diversity, and it involves us seeking and understanding across the lines of difference. It requires us to abandon our old beliefs. It requires us to believe and hold love at the center of the work that we do. Pluralism is a conversation, and it's a conversation that's going to ebb and flow through deep listening in order for each of us to gain a better understanding of one another. And it means showing up with love at the center as one's own commitment. This call to active engagement does not live in some margins of a theory, right? It's really active and alive in our own community. It's a living reality. And I shared with you all, I think at one Sunday, for over 20 years, and this is just an example, right? There's plenty of examples that we can see in our community. But for over 20 years, Zion Baptist Church, Beth Am Israel, and Mainline Reform have collaborated together to celebrate the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And each year, these congregations host an interfaith Shabbat service on Friday night. And it's followed then by an interfaith service at Zion Baptist Church on Sunday. And then they do service work all together that Monday. And these gatherings, it's not just about ceremonies, right? They are actually living and breathing this type of active engagement of change. There's another, and I'm kind of going off, and Rick, do I have permission to share a little bit? Is that okay? Yeah. I would have emailed you, but I kind of didn't have a chance to. But Rick, who's an MLUC member here, Rick McKnight, is a part of a group that's doing just this, right? It's a group of people who are getting together online since COVID, correct? Yeah? And they get together, these diverse group of people, and have a conversation about all kinds of things. Race is one of them. That's what active engagement looks like. They're actively talking, actively learning about one another. They're going deeper. That's another example of what's happening right here in our community. And the commitment to radical engagement shows up each and every month when Reverend John and I, we have an opportunity to go to different places of worship around town because we are a part of the Upper Mainline Interfaith Alliance. And this is where faith leaders from the mosque, the synagogues, the churches, and local service agencies gather to build bridges of understanding. And these are just some ways we practice our commitment to love at the center with our neighbors of diverse faith and traditions. So pluralism is not only about understanding the many ways of knowing, but how we each can connect to one another's human existence. Now, what happens in a world where we don't center love and we don't participate with pluralism? Well, when we do that, we do not have the opportunity to share in the humanity of one another. And sadly to say, we are also bearing witness currently of what that looks like. And I don't really need to say too much more about that. And that's why it's really important to also hold interdependence as part of our values and hold it with love at the center. Interdependence is so vital in times like today. It calls us to honor the sacred web of existence. And deep ecology reminds us that we are not isolated beings, but we are these vibrant threads woven into a beautiful, picturesque tapestry. I love poetry and imagery, right? So that's how I see interdependence playing out. And we are just a small piece of the greater good. Our values encourage us to be committed to creating and nurturing relationships founded on care, respect, and mutual understanding. And when we fall short, because we will, or if we make a mistake, because we do, restorative justice empowers us to heal. Restorative justice allows us to make amends and to become agents of change. Interdependence is beautifully expressed in wisdoms of many African traditions. I am because you are. Have you all heard that one? Yeah. And that truth resonates deeply within my own African American heritage because we have a very similar saying. If I succeed, if I do well, we all do well. And I'm sure you've heard, what we do to one, we do to all, and we do to ourselves. So we are part of this shared web of connection, shaping one another's lives through actions and intentions. And to fully embody our UU values, we are invited to recognize and honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And it's reflected in an ancient greeting in Sanskrit, namaste. Do you all know that? Namaste? Right. That means the light in me honors the light that is within you. Friends, it is that sense of shared sacredness. It is that sense of shared sacredness that offers us this deep respect and care for one another. It's a place that love finds its home at the center of our community. And our last value of generosity is seen between the traveler and the villagers of the story of Stone Soup. The villagers, one by one, brought what they had, and collectively it was enough. The traveler had faith in humanity, that they would be fed and taken care of. And this notion of faith, this notion that the traveler had faith, it gave the villagers an opportunity to be generous with their resources. The traveler and the villagers didn't just make soup that day. They created a relationship. They created a relationship of mutual care. That is the kind of symbiotic relationship we are meant to embody. The humanity of the traveler and the villagers was rooted in faith and understanding and generosity and a sense of beloved community for the moment. They were a blessing and a gift to one another. And as I close, I would like to invite each and every one of you to look inward and truly consider, what are you bringing to our stone soup pot? What are you bringing to our stone soup here at MLUC? And how are you featuring our new values with love at the center? How will you take action into justice? Even when the path is not easy, how will you show up for equity, ensuring every person's dignity is honored? How will you open yourself to transformation, allowing yourself and your community to grow and be changed for the better? How will you move beyond simply welcoming in diversity to actively engaging and embodying pluralism? Reaching out and listening and learning from those stories and beliefs that are different from your own? In what ways will you honor interdependence, recognizing that we are all woven together in a shared experience? And finally, how will you practice generosity? Not just in material things, not just with your money, but with your compassion, your presence, your love. What is just one thing you can bring to our stone soup with our UU values at the center? Just one.